keeping refugees in Kenya's Kakuma camp from getting clean energy. How educating and understanding bias is helping transracial adoption families. And ballet dancers of color welcome new shoe hues. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. Tonight we begin in Kenya, where gunmen kidnapped an Italian volunteer and shot and wounded a woman and 4 children late Tuesday in the Kilifi region, 60 kilometers inland from the coastal tourist resort of Malindi. According to police and witnesses, the men armed with AK-47 rifles seized the 23-year-old woman from a guest house in Chakama town. Police say they have not identified the attackers, and so far, no group has claimed responsibility. 2 witnesses told Reuters they heard the gunmen speaking Somali. The woman was taken after she came out of her room to find out what was going on. That's according to witnesses who spoke to Kenyan TV stations. The attackers opened fires. They left, wounding a woman and 4 children. A 10-year-old child was shot in the eye and a 12-year-old was hit in the thigh. The Italian charity the woman was working for, Africa Milele, says it helps orphan children. It is the first abduction of a foreigner in the area since raids blamed on Somali Islamist militants 6 years ago. Now, for more on the Kilifi attack, Ryle Mbor joins me by phone from Kilifi. Good evening, Ryle.
Good evening, Vincent. How are you?
I'm fine. Now, one of the things that we heard from there is that there were some suspects and the police were kind of following up on that. Do we know how far they've gone with this, and do they know who these people could be?
So no information has been, the identities of the suspects have not been revealed, and the police have not actually revealed much information, apart from when earlier they had actually tweeted the number of people and their names who had actually been wounded during the attack so far. So right now, there are no names, and we are not sure
who did it. Now,
Hello?
Yes, and I hear you. A number of people are also beaten up. There were some people were roughed up. We saw video that you actually sent of some fellows who had been beaten up really bad. Why? Who are these people and why were they being beaten up?
So the area where the abduction took place is, the area is called Chakama, and this area neighbors the river Sabaki. And locals believe that the people who abducted this lady, whoever they are, must have crossed the river into the neighboring town known as Kararacha. So something interesting about the town Kararacha, the town that neighbors Chakama, is that the people who live in this area are actually pastoralists from the Orma community, and the locals of Changame believe that these are the people actually who are causing instability in the region. So we arrived at the scene at around 12 p.m. and there are buses on transit. There are buses on transit that pass that route, and they actually have some of these Orma people on board. And these Orma people, they look. They're more of the people actually say they are Somalis, and they flashed them out and they were beating them and accusing them of causing instability in the area.
Now, one of the witnesses said that they heard these people say they want money from this young lady. Did it appear to them like it was a robbery, or this is a kidnap for ransom?
According to the witnesses we spoke to, this was an incident that was planned well. According to the witness we spoke to a local chief, Mr. Albert Chome, who said that this looks like a clearly planned event, because he says 3 days earlier, a man had actually booked a house at Chagama Guest House, and he had introduced himself to the people as a pastoralist who keeps goats. And the people had actually welcomed him into the community. So what is shocking is that Mr. Alfred Chome says that this same man is one of the 4 men actually who took part in this incident.
Well, we thank you very much for being there for us, and we hope we get some more updates perhaps tomorrow. Thanks a lot, Ryle. Railumbo reporting from Kilifi in Kenya. Now, one of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals is to provide clean and reliable energy to people worldwide. The residents of the Kakuma refugee camp in northern Kenya are among those in need of better energy sources to light, cook and work in their homes. But progress has been held up by their murky legal status and their lack of money to buy the product. Mohammed Yusuf reports.
Most refugees living in Kakuma have grown up using candles or kerosene-powered lamps to light their homes. This year, some have switched to solar power and say they like the savings.
Life
was very difficult before because we didn't have the technology we have today. Before, we were buying kerosene costing 100 shillings to light our home. We were incurring lots of expenses day after day. If you compare the expenses now, I'm only spending 30 shillings a day.
The United Nations Global Initiative for 2030 aims to provide clean, reliable and sustainable energy to people as part of an effort to elevate poverty, improve lives and raise living standards.
The target is definitely achievable and it has to be achieved. However, the pace that we are moving at does need to be significantly accelerated. A sustainable energy access is not going to be reliant on aid and handout, but rather on a robust market ecosystem.
So the UN is working with the private sector, technicians, financial institutions, humanitarian agencies and governments to move toward the goal. Currently, World Bank figures show 6 out of 10 people living in sub-Saharan Africa have no electricity, and the situation is even worse in rural areas. Some observers say the legal status of refugees, the fact they are not allowed to work, and doubts that they can afford to pay the alternative energy have put off companies from investing in these camps.
Frequently there's this misperception that people don't have access to money, and in some cases that's true. But if we can tap into the limited resources that development partners and donor agencies have, and the money that people have in their pocket, we can help make everything more efficient, make the whole system more efficient, more competitive, so people have access to greater opportunities and greater options.
David Mano's children, who do their studying by solar-powered lamps, are living proof that alternative energy has a future in Kakuma and other places where refugees are forced to gather. Mohammed Yusuf for VA News, Kakuma, Kenya.
Well, the United Nations is hosting a series of workshops tackling hate speech and incitement to violence in fractured South Sudan. Maya Womersley has the details.
These people know the tragic consequences of hate speech. Like millions of others, they fled ethnically charged bloodshed in South Sudan, finding their way to this protection of civilians, or POC camp. Here, the UN's launched a series of workshops to help people identify hate speech and mitigate its impact.
Their situation is also related, it's a consequence of hate speech and incitement to violence. So to be able to combat hate speech properly, we should really involve those who have been also victims and those who are also part of the population. And that's why we thought that community leaders in the POC would be a good target group to work on that and make sure that they will be able to send the message, to convey the message to their members.
The world's youngest nation descended into an ethnically charged conflict in 2013, in a dispute between President Salva Kiir and his former vice president, now rebel leader Riek Machar. The government signed a peace deal with rebel factions in September. But Mary Nehemiah Tut, one of the workshop's participants, says if hatred and hate speech remain pervasive in communities, then the conflict will not end.
It's better to sit down, reconcile, talk to each other and see how to overcome hatred and hate speech.
The workshops were organised by the Human Rights Division of the United Nations Mission in South Sudan.
Well, that report was filed by Maya Womersley of Reuters now. Both sides in the Yemenis' 3-year war signaling they may be ready to end the fighting. The Saudi-led military coalition, which supports Yemen's internationally recognized government, has ordered a halt in its offensive on the key Yemen port of Hodeidah, the country's main entry for food imports. Now, the Iran-backed Houthi rebels say they are stopping drone and missile strikes on the coalition forces. Viewers Laditza Hoke reports the United Nations is pushing for a ceasefire to end the raging humanitarian crisis in Yemen.
According to the United Nations, at least 10,000 people have been killed in the war in Yemen so far, and millions of people have no reliable access to food. UN officials say the bombing of civilians, blocking access to food aid, and other violations of humanitarian principles have caused the world's worst man-made humanitarian disaster.
This is not on the brink of a catastrophe. This is a catastrophe as we speak.
The conflict is seen as a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. A British-drafted UN resolution calls on the warring parties to cease attacks and negotiate for peace. Saudi King Salman said Monday his country will support the international effort, but it has a duty to protect Yemenis against Iran's interference.
The international community has to work to put an end to the Iranian nuclear program and stop its activities that threaten security and stability in the region.
Houthi rebel leaders agreed to stop rocket and drone attacks on the coalition forces if Saudi Arabia is genuinely interested in peace. The two sides are expected to meet for peace talks in Sweden by the end of the year.
Regarding the dialogue, we are ready for a dialogue at any time when there is a real dialogue leading to peace. If the UN Special Envoy for Yemen comes, we are ready for a dialogue. If he doesn't come, we are ready to fight until the last breath.
UN Special Envoy for Yemen, Martin Griffiths, has promised to accompany the Houthi representatives from the Yemeni capital of Sana'a if necessary.
This is a crucial moment for Yemen. I've received firm assurances from the leadership of the Yemeni parties, the governor of Yemen, of course, first, and then Ansarallah, that they are committed to attending these consultations. I believe they're genuine, and I expect them to continue in that way and to appear for those consultations, and indeed so do the Yemeni people, who are desperate for a political solution to a war in which they are the main victims.
The draft resolution on Yemen, presented to the UN Security Council on Monday, calls for an immediate truce in the port city of Hodeidah and sets a 2-week deadline for the warring sides to remove all barriers to humanitarian aid. Zlatica Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
Well, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Still ahead on Africa 54, the challenges of transracial adoptions. But first, a look at Wednesday's headlines.
In Kenya, police say around 8 gunmen kidnapped an Italian volunteer along Kenya's coast and wounded several people, including 3 children. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, residents of Beni, the area hit with violence, expressed frustration and uncertainty ahead of the upcoming elections scheduled for December 23rd. Zimbabwe's leadership change was hailed as a new political and economic dawn for Zimbabweans and widely celebrated, but little has changed since last November. In South Africa, the so-called AfriForum, an interest group representing Afrikaners, the 5% of the population descended mainly from Dutch, German, and French settlers, has stepped up street protest against land distribution plans and what it calls the targeted killing of white farmers. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.
Well, Stephanie Paul teaches 4th grade at a public school in Washington State. Since adopting 3 black children, the white suburban mom has learned some uncomfortable lessons about how race affects perceptions of a student's behavior or academic performance. Research shows adopted kids are more likely than others to experience learning and behavioral problems, and black children are more likely than their white peers to be disciplined for such problems. In part 3 of our adoption series, VOA producer Claire Morin-Gibert has more details. Haiti Adams-Fitzpatrick narrates.
One of my best friends came over to me and said, "Timney just said she doesn't want to be your friend because you're black." That made me get mad and go walk out of class sometimes. And I would just go out of school and stuff.
So this is the behavior I was talking about. She would get punished for leaving class when class was an environment where kids were calling her out for the color of her skin.
Niara is the second of Stephanie Poole's 3 adopted children. The family lives in Seattle, Washington state. Stephanie teaches 4th grade at a suburban public school. Motherhood has taught her some hard lessons about how race can influence people's perceptions of a student's behavior or academic performance. She knows because she's seen it before with her son.
Yeah, Carter's already internalized that and said, I don't want to be black. And that's a horrible thing to hear your son say, that he doesn't want to be who he is, you know.
Like Niara, Carter has an attention deficit disorder and trauma-related problems. A school district psychiatrist evaluated him and said he had tendencies to be violent, aggressive, and disruptive. Stephanie insisted those labels be removed from her son's specialized education plan.
I went right to the special ed department and said, I want these taken off, because this is literally the school to prison pipeline where we're talking about how can you list these descriptors of violent for a 6-year-old boy?
Nicholas Zill is a research psychologist in Washington. He's the co-author of a study for the University of Virginia's Institute for Family Studies that focuses on the academic performance of adopted children. There's extensive research on the subject. It shows adopted children are more likely to have learning and behavioral issues than other students.
The thing that's striking is that with many a large minority and even a majority of adopted children often have behavioral issues in the classroom, and they have some difficulty getting along with other children at a higher rate than biological children do.
As a teacher and a mother, Stephanie knows some children struggle in school, but she sees the education system as a big part of the problem.
If you look at the curriculum, it's mostly white. If you look at books, they're mostly white. And all of these things just disenfranchise our kids of color year after year after year.
Researcher Constance Lindsay says having a teacher of the same race can improve student outcomes. She was part of a team that analyzed the records of more than 100,000 black students in elementary and high schools. Those who had at least one black teacher had better results. Lindsay says it's the role model effect.
If you're growing up in a home that doesn't have a college-educated black person and you're able to see one at school who's your teacher, that might signal to you that, hey, I can do this too. If you have a white teacher who isn't trained in cultural competency and how to work with diverse students, it might be harmful for students.
Stephanie says they've flourished since moving from their Seattle neighborhood school to the Highline School District where she teaches, and where she says staff are trained to be sensitive to racial equity.
How much institutionalized racism is in our school structure is absolutely phenomenal. And I never had to realize that before I had black kids. And yet this has been the truth for all black families as far back as we can remember. But because I'm white, I never had to look at that.
Well, VOA reporter Claire Morin-Gibert now joins me to tell us more about her experience producing the interracial series. Claire, welcome to Africa 54, and forgive me for murdering your name.
No,
I feel like
you say it right.
French right now. So tell us, this is a very fascinating series. What was it like for you? What are some of the things perhaps we may not realize through the stories that you learned or that you found very interesting?
As a journalist, it was a fantastic human experience. I was so lucky to meet so many beautiful families. At the same time, it was sad to realize that in 2018, in America, being black, it's still challenging. Bias and discrimination are still a major issue. I have to say that the most striking thing was to realize how powerless white parents are when they are confronted to racism, and they they did not understand well at first.
And you know, people may say there are other interracial adoptions, could be Asian kids and all that. Is a black and white situation particularly challenging or interesting to observe?
It definitely is. Transracial adoption means that adopted kid do not share the same race as their adoptive parents. So you can have any combination possible. You have like Asian parents who can adopt Latino kids, but definitely we wanted to focus on one parent adopted black kids because this is where there are the most issues. I will give you just an example. If you have a black, especially with black boy, if you have a teenager at home and suddenly a burglar just break into the house, could he safely call the police? No.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you have to teach him that if he is black, the police can think he is the intruder and shoot him. Stories happen all the time. So this is a very different way of raising your kid.
Yeah, you're kind of dealing with your own child, but you have to make them realize they're not like you. That's it. That's pathetic. What can we expect in the rest of the series?
So tomorrow we will focus on police brutality. We will meet Alex Lando in Denver. At 19, he was just going to get burger with a friend, and he was almost beaten to death by police. He survived and became one of the most prominent right activists in Denver. So a fascinating story. And on Friday, we focused on the quest of origin.
Yeah. Everybody wants to know where they came from.
Yeah.
Right? Thank you.
Exactly.
Thank you. Claire, appreciate very much for you coming here. So as we just mentioned, Claire Morange-Burke's adoption series continues on Thursday with part 4. Now, at 19, Alex Lando was beaten by police in Denver, Colorado, after being stopped for an alleged traffic violation. Now, the incident transformed the young black man, not just because he won a hefty judgment against the city. Now he teaches young people and their parents about civil rights. His own white parents reflect on what they now call their naivete in thinking they could protect their son from racial bias. You don't want to miss this one, so be sure to join us on Thursday. Welcome back to Africa 54, and here's what's trending. Communicating the latest tips and techniques that can help farmers in a timely and accessible manner can be a challenge, especially in Africa, where infrastructure tends to hamper efficient mass communication. That's where the Nairobi-based production company Media saw an opportunity. Its groundbreaking reality TV show Shamba Shape Up airs twice a week in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. Shamba means farm in Swahili. The program is delivered in a practical documentary style that is keenly followed by over 5 million viewers in a region hungry for the latest and best agricultural practices. Research shows that 46% of its viewers have altered their farming methods since Shamba Shape Up's pilots aired in 2011. Well, next up, Cameroonian entrepreneur Boma Mohamed is on a mission to empower others to become more energy self-sufficient. He's training young people to turn waste into biogas and move away from the traditional source of fuel, firewood. Through his company, Royal Renewable Energy Cameroon, Mohamed runs regular courses at a cost of 15,000 CFA francs, or $26 US dollars rather, to train people on how to produce biogas from the decomposition of organic waste. Mohamed, along with the 10 people he employs and a handful of interns, have also been at the forefront of installing digesters, the machines designed to capture methane gas released by decomposing material in houses, schools and businesses in rural Cameroon. Mohamed also trains people on how to produce organic fertilizer. Well, and in other sustainability news, we all know that eating out our takeout meals with single-use plastic cutlery is damaging the environment, but sometimes there is just no alternative. Or is there? Well, industrial designer Pontus Törnqvist has created prototype throwaway knives, forks, and spoons that contain no plastic. The main ingredient is potato. This potato plastic cutlery range is made using potato starch, water, and glycerol. Its cutlery decomposes in soil within 2 months. According to Tonquist, up to 20% of farmed potatoes are rejected as undesirable and make their way into potato starch mix. And that's what is trending today. Well, now the typical image of ballerinas is of agile dancers moving effortlessly across the stage on the tips of their toes, their feet bound in shinky pink slippers, which seem to be part of their bodies. Now, unless the ballerinas' bodies are not white. An American company began offering brown-toned slippers last year, and last month, Britain's oldest ballet apparel supplier began offering shoes made to better match the skin color of non-white dancers. VOA's Mariama Diallo reports on the changing trend.
Dancing in a ballet slipper that matches her skin is an incredible feeling, says Chira Robinson, a step into the right direction. She's been dancing since she was 8 years old.
I think it's amazing, especially because times are changing and, you know, there's so many different colors out there and ballet should be acceptable to everyone.
Made by Britain's oldest manufacturer, Freed of London, the new pointe shoes are available in bronze and brown along with the traditional pink.
When I received these amazing Freed pointe shoes called Ballet Bronze, I felt like I was really lucky because my first pointe shoes actually were super pink and super hard and everything, and it didn't match my skin color.
The 89-year-old ballet gear maker worked with the international dance company Ballet Black, whose dancers are all of Black and Asian descent, to create the new shoes. Marie-Astrid Mons is a junior artist who joined the company 4 years ago.
Finding your skin color in a ballet shop, it's something very special. You have the feeling you are part of the industry of dance, and you have the feeling that nothing is impossible because it's accessible and because your skin color is there.
Previously, dancers would have to perform a paint-caking ritual by using foundation makeup or other paint types to darken the standard issue pink shoes.
Even though that's how I grew up, you know, not knocking tradition and everything like that, but times are changing, and we need to see people who look like us. And in doing that, we need brown tights, brown shoes.
Dancing in shoes that fit their persona is no longer a dream. It's a reality that gives these ballerinas the feeling they are dancing on air. Mariama Diallo, VOA News.
Well, and that's it for today. Have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. Woodwork is any part of a house or building that is made of wood.
Crawl out of the woodwork.
This expression sounds troubling.
I won! I have the winning lottery ticket.
Well, that's great. How much money did you win?
I won $25,000. But please, don't tell anyone.
You're right.